It's wonderful to be with you this morning as we talk about fun in the flowers. And there's no better time than the winter time to think about fun with your plants and your flowers. So I thought that I'd kind of do this in two segments. One with the flowers and the plants we find in the house. And then the second part, we would walk through the garden and see what's happening out there. I thought it'd be really fun this morning if we did some propagation and made some babies with our house plants that have grown to be a little bit oversized. And at the same time that I'm doing these plants, they're going to be plants that we use in filtering air and getting rid of air toxins. The first plant I'm going to work with is a pothos. This is your variegated pothos, and to propagate it, I'm going to take cuttings from my excuse me, from my trailings that I'm going to root. And while I'm rooting, I also will make a bouquet. So I take my stems from my pothos, and all of these on the back, these are nodules. Wherever there's a leaf, there's a nodule, and there's going to be new growth or roots that will develop. So since this is getting a little bit long for my stand, I'm just going to go ahead and cut. And I cut up close enough to the next leaf so when the next visitor comes to my home, they won't see that I've been trimming on it because there's not a long stem left. Pothos are such easy plants to grow. They're low light plants. They can dry out. They're very forgiving. And sometimes when you haven't watered sufficiently, you will get a brown spot on the leaf, and I just groom my plants by cutting the same direction the leaf is growing. We need to make sure that we do have the stems. I'm going to go ahead and take off another bottom leaf so that I can get the stems in my water easy enough. And you want to make sure and check every so often that your stems are still in the water. And when you're rooting plants, you also like to change your water at least once a week so that there will be more oxygen coming from your new supply of water for your plants. Well, I have my pothos in there to root, except I've got room for more. And I think I'll even give this a better haircut. When I start trimming on my plants, if a little bit is good, more is better. I probably will have about 4 new plants by the time these all get rooted. And the reason why you don't want to leave your leaves underneath the water is that the leaves would rot and not make for a healthy growing medium for your rooting system. From the back side, that's looking pretty good. Probably still need one more. And I probably still need one more on that side. And this makes for an arrangement that could almost be used for a centerpiece. And every so often when I'm checking it, I'll go ahead and stick them down a little bit more, and then each week I'll come back through and make sure that the water level is up, and you can see the water level on this. Taking cuttings is one way of grooming your plant. Now we're much more symmetrical and we'll send out more runners. One way of grooming your plant and at the same time making new babies. And then the next plant we're going to do is a bromeliad that is much, much overgrown. And this plant we're going to divide the root system to make new ones. This is a plant that I've had at home for probably, well, it looks like 14 years, but I think, according to the roots, but I think it's probably just been 5. But the plant does well when it is root bound, and I do feed regularly. As you can tell, I can get at least 5 new good-sized plants, except this is a beautiful plant all in its own. And if I weren't going to divide it, I would just put it into a larger, repot it into a larger pot. It's important when you're maintaining your house plants that you keep them groomed and you keep them clean and you keep all the dying leaves off, and not only does it make it look better, but it also makes it healthier. I have my knife, and I'm going to be cutting through my root system. We can get in, we can zoom in close on that. And sometimes it takes a little bit of elbow grease when you've got a plant as old as this. But if you keep pulling on it, you'll see that it will pull loose. The roots will divide naturally. Now I have another beautiful bromelia that's still a good size that I'll be ready then to repot like I repot all of my plants. So that's one way of rooting a bromelia, but just in case I did accidentally cut off one of these stems, I could also put that in water and it would root. I'll set my bromelia aside. This is very good for purifying the air and taking out a lot of the toxic gases that we have, that we breathe daily. And when I water my bromelia, I always water inside the center. And if you can zoom in a little bit closer, you can see it's beginning to have some small blooms inside. Another plant that I wanted to share with you that you can root or you can immediately pot is the airplane plant or the spider plant. And there are several different varieties, but this plant has really become popular lately because it's so easy to grow and it is so good for cleansing the air. I have taken this one cutting, and they're actually a baby growing on a baby, and I have soil already in my pot and I've watered it down, so I'm just ready to do a planting now with my airplane plant, with my spider plant. And these are just really easy to grow, to give as a gift or to add to your collection of plants. I'll feed these and they'll be ready to grow. And I had enough on that one plant that I could easily get 2 new cuttings. Let's see how I even have another baby coming. I can even root in. It's really rewarding to grow your plants over the years and then to see them reproduce and to be able to grow new babies. And lots of people have grown plants for years and years and years, and they have kind of become like a family heirloom. You notice I cut this off, and I decided it's okay to root plants when you're rooting, and I thought I would add that to my centerpiece already of my pothos. So I'm going to scoot it down into the water, add just a little variation in the foliage, and it's still in the family coloring. And in no time, there'll be roots growing from my air plant, my spider plant, or my airplane plant. These are some of the best plants for purifying the air, and I have one more I wanted to show you how to divide this one, because this has been such a popular house plant this year. This is a ZZ plant, or an eternity plant, and it has rhizomes. And so to divide it, he's happy. And this pot is, in fact, he probably should be in a half size larger shoe, it seems. As we pull the soil away from the root system, we will see rhizomes. And this is a plant that can be let go dry, and it's still very forgiving. And this has been a water reservoir for this plant. And so if I pull it apart, you can see a big tank of water there, just ready to be used for all these roots of this eternity plant. We've had a lot of people who have given us memorial plants, these eternity plants. So what I would do, I would just go ahead and repot this back into this pot with some new soil, because the nutrients would be needed. And when you repot it, you spread the roots out so that these are going to have more room to grow. And from this plant, I could have 2 good-sized plants and 2 more that'll take a while to grow. So evaluate your house plants and see if you've got babies just waiting to be propagated, or if your plants need to be repotted just within themselves rather than dividing them. So we will be taking a stroll outside in just a minute. Here we are at the end of January. We've been considering the things that need to be taken care of as far as houseplants. And in every opportunity that we can get, when the weather is decent or when it isn't decent, it is so consoling, so peaceful to walk out into the garden. And I am so grateful to Pat for asking me to do this, because yesterday was a beautiful day. Yesterday afternoon I thought, oh, I've got to go out and check my garden and see what's happening, so I can tell others what's happening in my garden, and they may be able to discover the same thing. So I was wandering around the garden, and there, hidden on January the 27th, underneath some trees, were 3 daffodils. I was so excited over my 3 daffodils. Had I not walked out, I would have missed the beginning of the birthing of these. I probably would have seen them before they finished. But daffodils are happening. Several others are up so high, and hyacinths are up so high, but these were a gift. And along with these, I also saw 2 snowdrops, which are these tiny, tiny little snowdrops that are so aptly named, and then 4 crocus. I was so excited. I came back to the garden center and I shared with everybody my crocus, my hyacinths, and my snowdrops. And then, as I was walking along, the variegated vinca is planted, well, it kind of took up root itself beside one area of my house, and it already has a beautiful blue bloom on it. So those were my treasures that I found yesterday, simply because I was walking through my garden and not really expecting these to be in bloom, and had a nice little gift there just waiting to be enjoyed. That's my treasure for the week. And then I started looking around at all the trees and all the shrubs, and Foster hollies were still beautiful. And I know we use these at Christmas time, but my Foster holly trees were just still loaded and so beautiful, and I thought, I must cut some of these and enjoy them. And so I cut a couple of stems of these, and then I thought, what else can I find in my garden that's doing something really special now? And so I started looking, and I was looking at my little gem magnolia, which is a dwarf magnolia whose leaves are much smaller than our regular southern magnolia. And I thought, how lovely that is. So I cut my little gem magnolia. And then as I was walking through by my house, my needlepoint hollies were just wonderful. And, you know, at the beginning of March, whenever I get a chance to start trimming, all these long shoots are going to be trimmed off because I like to keep my needlepoint holly cut back so the center gets thicker as it grows. And I thought, well, just let me cut a few of these. And we're beginning to see all different kinds of leaves, shapes, and sizes. Then my hemlock was standing there in my rose garden, and I thought, now that's a pretty needle. Even though we use those at Christmas, I thought I can enjoy this a while longer. And then I cut me 3 hemlock stems. And then as I was looking in another part of the garden, my little gem boxwoods, my hedge, were a beautiful green, dark green on the upper leaf and lighter green on the underneath. And there's so much detail in each one of the leaves, and each stem, each leaf, each needle is so different on all of these. I'm going to save that for another smaller arrangement. Then of course my nandina, which is beginning to show off by getting its deep red color. And I thought, I always use nandina, so I cut some nandina. And I was just going to stick these in, but while you're sticking, you might as well do a little bit of placement. And then I walked by my laurel petal, which is this beautiful purple leaf that grows in a loose bush form. And come 1st of March, when I start trimming all my other shrubs, I'll be taking these beautiful top stems off. And I thought, well, I might as well enjoy those in a vase. And I'm still taking off my lower limbs, as you see. And we'll insert these wherever that might look good to Kathy. Is this placement good, Kathy?
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And as I was cutting, and I was so enjoying each one of the branches, each one of the stems, I was just so appreciative of the beauty that we get to live with and enjoy daily. And God provides all around for us if we just open our eyes and look. And I'm going to grab another vase to put these in. I thought that a yellow vase would be kind of good for these. This is my cooler, and it will root just in the water, and you can have another plant to put in a container or to plant in the ground.
What's it called again?
Aucuba, A-U-C-U-B-A. Its leaves stay on all year long. It's not deciduous, and it's just a beautiful plant to have. And then as I was looking through in another area of my garden, my kaleidoscope of belia already had new growth on it. Of course, we get a freeze. That new growth may not be as happy, but it'll just have a small setback. In the meantime, we'll enjoy. I was in one of the areas of my garden that had lavender, and I thought, its coloring is different. I bet that I can show that with some dark green stems, and it will look good. Not only look good, but it will be fragrant at the same time. Looks kind of pretty with the magnolia nestled in there. And then my little boxwood I showed you a minute ago, I'm going to stick it in with my smaller container here. And every so often I'll just cut my stems to bring inside so that I can enjoy all my different greens. And I think sometimes we fail to do that. This is my arum leaves. And in the spring, it'll have an orange, have a little berry, and then it'll turn orange in the fall, and then has these beautiful leaves all winter. Then my ivy. It's always beautiful unless it's growing too boisterously where it might not be supposed to grow. And but it's a pretty plant, I think, and a pretty ground cover, as long as you keep it controlled. And I did cut, oh, here's a pretty stem. And I always look at the ends. Sometimes they'll have a little bit of dieback on them, so I always clean them up that way. Take my bottom limbs off. There we go. Really need that one to go that way. There we go. That's better, thank you. And then this is Mahonia holly that I cut, and I wanted to cut it and show, because I have a new one to show you also. But I'll go ahead and stick. While you're looking at this Mahonia belii, you'll see the leaves are really holly-like leaves with prickly ends. It's a beautiful plant, but not so easy to work with when you're dealing with its leaves. So these are some of the things that I just cut from my garden to show to you. And then while I was out there, I was looking at some spaces that I may need to add a few more things. I may need to change some of my plants out. And it's always interesting to see what new plants are going to look like. And this is a Pieris Temple Bale. This is another Temple Bale. This one is a Katsura, and which has the deep burgundy berries or buds on it. And then this one is the original Temple Bale with the green berries, except these are really pods. And they're getting ready to open to bloom. And each one of these clusters will be like a cluster of lily of the valley. In fact, a lot of people will call this plant a lily of the valley. These might be two that you might want to consider to add to your garden. Another one, if you don't have Helleborus in your garden, they're the flower that blooms while we're still getting snow. And mine are just beginning to come up now. But this was one we were growing. It's a new variety. And this one is Royal Heritage, which is your deep magenta. And then if you're looking for a bloom, these are the camellias. And these are hardy camellias that we're now so fortunate to have to plant in our garden. And this one is, they come in pink, red, white. And this one is a conjuro. And the blooms are beautiful. Its foliage stays green all year long. Likes to be planted sort of in a protected place. And then, there is the cuba I was showing you a few minutes ago. That is a colorful plant you might want to add. And then when I showed you the Mahonia bilii, this is a new Mahonia that does not have the stickery leaves, but both varieties have all of these yellow blooms in the springtime, which is beautiful. But this is a really pretty new variety that lots of people are beginning to grow.
Beautiful.
Don't forget to not overlook the bare limbs, the trunks that have no leaves on them, because there is so much beauty in them. This is my Chinese Magnolia Jane, and I just think that each stem is so curvy and so meticulously designed. And then at the end there's a little puff on it. It's going to be a beautiful pink and white bloom later, but in the meantime, it has so much character that it will add lots to whatever grouping of flowers that you may be doing. And I find branches just add a lot to arrangements. And then I came by my euonymus burning bush, and I was looking at the stem, the 4 squares, the 4 sides, and how the little red buds are already beginning to come out. You know, our stems, our branches are just as different as we people are, and that's a good thing. And of course, many of you may have corkscrew willow planted in your yard. Excuse me, I dropped one of my limbs. And they're great in whatever you're doing in the wintertime. And an added benefit is they will go ahead and root, and you can have some more corkscrew willows to plant later in the spring or the summer. They just kind of give a flow to whatever you're doing and remind you that you have a corkscrew willow growing in your garden and however it wants to grow. Then this is my Scotch broom. If you don't have a Scotch broom planted, it's just an upright green structure. In fact, it looks like this in the garden. And it's so beautiful, just bare. But in a couple of months, it'll have a beautiful, small yellow bloom on it. And it'll be very fragrant. So if you don't have a Scotch broom in your garden, you may want to add that. And then this is my Japanese, blood-good Japanese maple that is always pretty. I also have a coral bark that the stem is more orange and red at this time of year. But many of you have Japanese maples, and many of them are your blood-good. So enjoy the beauties of the bare stem before all of those little red burgundy leaves come on. So that the stems just kind of complete that collection of what my garden is like. Well, we're at the end of January. There's a special holiday that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks in January called your Love Day. So I thought I would show you how to make a heart topiary. And this is the topiary form that I use. This is a 6-inch ivy. Get these in green, variegated yellow, variegated white. So I placed that to where I had at least a couple of long shoots, stems on either side. And now I'm going to wrap my heart form. And of course, in real life, I would have taken the price tag off of the topiary form, but I've covered it with my ivy. And then I'll take a long shoot from this side and I'll bring it up through. And I start as close to the center point of the topiary form as I can. And you can keep some small wires handy to wire to keep it, or you can just kind of tie them together. Now, that's pretty in itself. I probably would do just a little bit more around, and I'm going to bring this long stem over and wrap it. I'm going to wrap one more stem, and having 2 weeks still till Valentine's, I still have time to get my ivy trained and fill my topiary form up to where it's all in the shape of a heart. Now, there is my ivy, and I'm going to leave this, and if I've got space enough, I won't cut any of the long stems off, I'll leave it. But I'm going to add just a little bit of red for the holiday. This is a calicoy or a calancho. I have space enough in here to insert this to give a little color at the base. And I'll do that over on the other side too. And I have just nestled them in. Sometimes I'll go ahead and dig down into my soil if they're going to be growing longer and nestle it in to where it's more positioned, and that's what I'm doing right now. The fingers make a wonderful shovel sometimes. And then I'm going to do one more right over here. So I've used 3 of the calancho or calicoy, which are in the succulent family. And I will moss that, water them when I water the ivy. And there's my centerpiece. That could be a standalone centerpiece. Or I had this pretty red container and I thought, we must use that. So I have put those in that. This is a Dakota cyclamen, which is a corm that will bloom for months. I'm going to nestle that into my little Valentine garden and do the same over here. And depending on what it looks like from the front, then all we'll need will be the dinner, and this can be in the center of the table because it looks good from all sides. And then of course the anthurium, which is the heart-shaped house plant, which is so good for cleansing the air too. Makes a wonderful plant for Valentine's. And then when I was out, many of us are growing pansies now. I just wanted to remind you, when I cut these for my little vases to make a centerpiece in itself, that you'll groom your pansy pots just the way you groom your pots in the summertime. You'll deadhead them. And let me grab my pot of pansies right over here. You'll deadhead them just like you do your geraniums and your begonias and everything else that you grow in your pots in the summer that have to be deadheaded. You keep it deadheaded, and you also feed your pansies and keep the dead leaves trimmed off while they're in your pots. The cleaner you keep your plants, the more you keep them deadheaded, the more they'll bloom, and the more you'll enjoy them. Well, we've covered some houseplants. We've covered some plants for our garden outside. So whether you're inside or outside, may your days be filled with blessings and blossoms. Thank you.